I'm working on this John Deere 110 garden tractor. This is part 14 of a multi-part series. In the last video, I put the starter generator back together, and I ended the video by complaining about this worn bracket. Here's the part that I bought to replace it. I got it on eBay. It looks the same, except my worn out one has the part number cast into it. I'll measure the old one. It's 7 inches and 93 thousandths. On the replacement one, it's 7 inches and 114 thousandths. That's a 21 thousandths difference, more than a 64th of an inch. When I try to put it in position, I have to keep it square or it gets stuck. That's a lot better fit than the old one. Once the bolt is in there, it don't stick, and there's not much end clearance. That's good. In case you don't remember, the reason I took the starter generator apart is because this tractor had run a long time with this long bolt loose. Well, the bolt has some damage too, mostly around these threads and a little bit under the head of the bolt. I don't have a bolt that long, but I have two shorter ones like this. I'm going to cut them and make one long one. The first step is to cut off the part you don't want. And this is what's left. Now I need to hold both bolt halves together straight and true, so I'm putting each half in a V-block. This is a matched pair of V-blocks, so they're both about the same. I have ground parallels in the vise. That's going to support the V-blocks so they're lined up with each other. When I clamp the V-blocks in the vise, both halves of the bolt should be in line. And I'll put this piece of scrap metal here to keep the weld spatter from going in the vise and onto the parallels. Notice I chamfered both halves of the bolt so they come to a point where they meet. That should allow the weld to penetrate to the center of the bolt. You don't want a ring of weld around the outside of the bolt. You want that to be all weld to the center of your bolt. I start in the middle and fill that slot up on the top side. I want to let it cool for a bit, then do the other side. I'll let it cool for a bit again. I turned the welder down some. I'll go over the low spots and make sure there's plenty of weld on there. And now I'm going to make it round again. Here's the new one compared to the old one. Okay, that's everything. That feels pretty good. Now I'm going to clean up this bracket a little bit and make it a nice darker green to match the rest of the tractor. This part's kinda tricky. It's heavy enough that I can't move it around with one hand. And remember, it binds up on the bracket if it gets crooked. And I have to move it around while I push the bolt in. Okay, that feels good. I'm going to use the belt to hold this in position while I fiddle with the brackets. Based on the paint marks, I think this went this way. This original bolt has messed up threads, so I want to replace that. It's 7/8 inches long, not a common size. Luckily I had one. This bolt goes in from the back side, because later you have to take the nut off to get this belt guard on. First I snug up this bolt, then push out on the starter generator to give the belt some tension, and tighten the upper bolt on the slot. Don't forget to tighten the nut on that bottom bolt, or your brackets will wear out from the vibration. Now I can take this nut back off to get the belt guard on. I added flat washers to these two bolts. The top one has a slotted hole, and the bottom one has an oversized hole. Anytime I put a bolt into this flywheel housing, I turn the engine over to make sure the bolt don't contact the flywheel. Make sure all your bolts are tight. Now I'm going to do some wiring. This big one should go on the A terminal. There's an A stamped in the housing there. A is for armature. And there's an F stamped by that one. F is for field, because that's your field winding. Make sure the nut underneath is tight first. That keeps the stud in position. Then you can tighten the top one. This green wire goes on the F terminal. It's connected to the F terminal down there on the regulator. Don't forget to tighten the stud first, then put the wire on top of that. Okay, let's see what I have here. The two battery cables should reach okay. This red wire goes to the coil. It would reach going this way, but there's not a good way to keep it away from that pulley. I think it went through the block behind the flywheel. It looks like the wire's not long enough to go under the starter generator. I'm going to run the wire under this cable. It needs to stay low and away from the heat of the cylinder fins. Here's what it looks like at the coil. That's pretty clean. That's it for the wiring, except for those headlight wires hanging loose there. I'll fix that later. I'm going to put a battery in it and see if it cranks over. This is an old weak battery, but it's okay to test with. Whenever I'm starting something I've not seen run before, I connect the ground cable with some vice grips. That way, if something goes wrong, I can disconnect the battery fairly quickly. Okay, I think I'm ready. Make sure it's in neutral. I bumped the starter and nothing happened. This light comes on, so that's good. Maybe the clutch pedal has to be down. That didn't do it. I think everything's connected. So what's missing is the signal to trip the solenoid. That's got one of those connectors that push onto the threaded stud. It don't feel like it grabs the stud very well. Okay, that was it. I forgot I wanted to take that spark plug out. I know the battery's weak and it's not gonna start anyways. The ignition still don't work. I guess I have to hold that connector on. I'll have to fix that later. Alright, well that sounds good. I don't hear any bad noises. Remember, I bought this at a consignment auction. I've never heard it run. I'm still hoping it don't knock or smoke. Now I want to see if it sparks. Here's the spark plug and wire that came with the tractor. The wire looks pretty good. It feels like it fits in the coil okay. The plug looks oily and dirty. I'm going to clean it up and see if it sparks okay. Now it looks a lot better. I'm going to give it a try. The gap feels pretty good already at 25 thousandths. I'm always worried about getting a good ground connection when I do this. And until I fix that solenoid connection, it takes two hands to get the engine to crank over. I made this thing a while back. Here's a convenient bolt to connect it to. Make sure the wire reaches. I made this nut big enough to get a grip on. That should work. Okay, I changed the battery so the engine will crank properly. Okay, I closed the garage door and turned on a few lights so the spark should show up. Well, that's kind of wimpy. This is a used spark plug that I used to test with. That sparks better. Here's a brand new plug. It's a Champion J19LM. That looks good. I'm going to use that one. Well, that's as far as I'm going this time, and here's what it looks like. It cranks and it sparks. Next time I'll work on getting some fuel to it. Alright, that's it.